cells is also very cool because you can study development, you can teach developmental biology, and you can also create cells to study and teach physiology. So STEM cells open up a lot of different avenues for teaching many areas of bioscience. Okay. So this slide summarizes some of the stem cells of the human life cycle, which I won't dwell on too much. As I mentioned, you begin your life as a stem cell, and you can see it here, the zygote at day 1. And this undergoes a truly remarkable series of division and development to create various structures that eventually result in the birth of a human, which grows to become an adult. And at every stage in this life cycle, there are different kinds of stem cells that are fueling your growth, development, repair, and maintenance. And if you are very unlucky, you may acquire mutations in your stem cells, or even somatic cells may acquire mutations that make them like stem cells, which form the growth of certain cancers. So teaching with stem cells, you can actually also provide education programs that teach about disease and cancer and many other cellular diseases. And you'll see that more as we go through this discussion. Okay. So stem cells have a lot of potential in research to study the development of humans, how diseases occur, and potentially how to treat them and discover new drugs. And they also have these really interesting properties in education, in that you can use them to study development, cellular biology, molecular biology, molecular disease, physiology, standard lab techniques. You can teach a lot of different programs with stem cells at the heart as the teaching model. So our lab is particularly interested in a type of stem cell called a pluripotent stem cell. And the reason that this is really interesting to us, it has a lot of properties that make it very useful for teaching education programs to children and professionals. So it can turn into, this type of stem cell can turn into potentially any cell in the human body. So if we wanted to run a neuroscience class, we can take these cells and turn them into all kinds of different neurons. And teach neuroscience and the development of neural structures. We can teach lots of things using these cells. They're also, these cells will grow forever in the lab. So that means that we have a renewable source of them to teach all these education programs. We can propagate them very easily. And they're also very useful. They have some uses in research. That I won't go into too much, but these cells are very useful in science, medicine, but also for teaching different types of bioscience and physiology classes. And we do in fact have a course where we teach the students about how heart cells are created for science and research using these cells. So you can generate a lot of very interesting hands-on lab courses with these cells at the center as a teaching model. They can be isolated from 2 sources. So they have been isolated from human embryos, but nowadays the labs that work with pluripotent stem cells generate them more ethically by taking a skin cell from a patient and then genetically modifying it so that it turns into an induced pluripotent stem cell, or a human pluripotent stem cell, that you can then grow in the lab and use to teach a variety of techniques and scientific concepts. As I mentioned, the reason that we're so interested in pluripotent stem cells is because they do have this unique ability to turn into any cell in the human body. So we can use them for teaching basic biology. We can use them for teaching disease modeling, developmental studies. You can use them in therapeutics and for teaching therapeutic strategies. So they have a lot of uses in both science, medicine, and also in education and training, workforce development training. So that brings me on to, there's a little primer about stem cells and what they are and the stem cells that we're interested in. I wanted to talk a little bit about what we do at Pathways and how we provide different resources and education programs focused on stem cells as a teaching model. So we are a nonprofit organization. We spun out of USC, and we have 3 primary activities that we are involved in. So we have a lab facility that we do research in, and we provide space for other companies. But it also provides a community lab for students to come and learn hands-on skills and do their own research. And they can do that on the setting of a biotech company, so they can see other biotech companies and scientists working and learn from them as they're in the lab working themselves. We also have contract research support services where we do our own research and we do research for other people. And this is really interesting because it enables us to generate a lot of useful techniques and tools that we then feed into our education programs. And I'll talk about that as I go along. And then the third component is the hands-on bioscience and career education. So we, I would say over 50% of our activities are dedicated to running hands-on programs to teach lab skills, biotech lab skills with stem cells as the teaching model, developing programs for other organizations, running hands-on community labs, and just generally building the skills of students from even kindergarten all the way up to professional scientists. And our mission, our broad mission, is to advance stem cell science, but also to help students to get into bioscience careers and biotech careers. So to provide them with the skills that they need, the technical skills that they need, the real world skills. And I'm going to talk more about that as we go along. So this is a brief overview of our history. I won't dwell on it too much. And I have uploaded these slides for anyone who wants to learn more. But it basically summarizes that since 2008, we actually began developing hands-on education using stem cells as a teaching tool in 2008. So I recognized, as did others quite early on, that stem cells have all these really very cool properties that make them great for teaching lab science and actually all kinds of science. And so since 2008, we have been slowly developing stem cell technologies, translating them into education programs for all ages. And this culminated in 2016 with us leaving USC and becoming our own organization. So we had developed by that time so many programs and had plans to develop more that it warranted us leaving, actually leaving USC and becoming an independent organization in 2016, which is what we did. And we formed Pathways to Stem Cell Science. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what we do. So starting with our lab facilities, we have 3 problems that we're trying to address. The first is that we want to create a laboratory community that serves scientists at every stage. So we understand that trained scientists are really important to the biotech industry, and that there's a lot of theoretical and traditional schooling. The students receive that a lot. But even in college, they can be lacking the hands-on skills, the specific hands-on skills that they need to transition out of education and into a professional biotech position or bioscience position. So what we want to do is create a lab setting where we support the biotech community. We provide them with lab space. But we also have lab space available for young students, even in middle school, all the way up to professional scientists, so that they can work together in a community where the students can learn alongside the scientists. So we have this kind of this lab space that supports everybody at all stages. And we have these 4 lab options from the community lab, which supports students, the flex lab, which supports PhD level scientists who are looking to branch off and do their own thing. We have labs that support startup companies, and then a space that supports more professional companies that are further along. So we have individuals at all of these stages of their career, and it creates a really interesting environment for students to see how does one progress to become a professional scientist and to run your own company one day. And I think that's really important because young students get a lot of exposure to colleges and education in colleges. There's a lot of college summer programs, but there are not a lot of biotech programs that show the types of jobs and the environment that you can move into after college. What is it like to be a scientist? And where does science occur? Where does it take place? How does it take place? Who is in science? So these are the kinds of things that we want to show students by having this community of people of all stages. And you can see our lab space here. So we renovated in 2020. We opened March of 2020. And this is our facility that houses all of these different spaces for people of different stages in their career. The second problem that we are working to address, which is not an education problem, but interestingly, it enriches the education that we provide. So we are also a research organization, and we are providing all kinds of research services from cause services to custom research support. And we also have our own research and development. And this is really important to the education programs that we run because it provides research opportunities for students in the community lab. It enables us to create new cells, new methodologies that we can feed into the education programs so that students are staying current in the skills that they're learning. And I think it makes us better scientists and better teachers. And we have a unique model where our education programs are based on the real science that we and others do. So they impart skills and ideas that are relevant and modern within the biotech field. So we are engaged in all kinds of research, from understanding how to derive stem cells, how to differentiate them into different cell types, how to modify them and manipulate them. But as part of this research, we also do education research. So we are trying to develop new ways to offer virtual programs and mobile labs using real models. So how can we take what we do in our lab that's very specialized and someone has to come to us? How can we take that and adapt it so that we can run it as a virtual program? We can run it as a mobile lab. So through this research, we're also doing education research with the hopes of developing new educational tools. So as an example, we have an interesting project right now where we have derived pluripotent stem cells from monkeys, which is kind of cool. It's kind of a cool science project. And the goal of this is to supply the researcher that we do this project for with these cells and to turn them into neurons. So this creates opportunities for students who come into the lab to engage in this research But also we will take some of this and we will most likely have a neuroscience course where we cover essential topics in neuroscience using neurons and stem cells to teach skills relating to neuroscience. And so this is kind of how the methodology works. And a lot of our courses are based on former projects that we've done, where we've taken what we've learned in those projects, turned them into education programs that teach these very basic skills, but within an interesting, modern context. But the thing that you probably are most interested in is the education that we offer. So how does this look? And what is our goals in terms of education? So the problem that we are really trying to resolve in education is how to provide students with the skills and experiences that they need to become professionals in the biotech and biosciences field that they are just not going to be able to get in school. So there's only a limit to what you can teach in a school, even in a college lab class. And it's a very specific setting, and it does not always reflect the professional environment that a student may go into. And it does not always provide them with all of the skills and knowledge and information that they need to be a professional in the biotech field. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to fill this gap of information relating to how does one take education and translate it into a professional science career. And we've identified that there are 3 things that we feel we need to address to be able to do this, to be able to give students that pathway to bioscience careers. And the first is the real world context that we provide through the lab and the education programs being based on real life research. So it's quite difficult to do this in a school, again, because it's a specific setting that does not reflect the biotech industry. We also feel that there's a need for students to speak to other scientists and gain information about the various careers that exist in science and how does one develop a biotech career, bioscience career. And I think students really do not appreciate actually how many different areas careers are available to someone with a science degree. I think they view science as either medicine, so becoming a doctor, or becoming a research scientist. So what we try to do through career education programs and just real world exposure is broaden that idea and for them to understand that there's actually many different jobs that one can hold as a scientist. You don't necessarily have to be in a research lab or treating patients. And then the other thing that we're very sensitive to is trying to provide education equally to everybody based on their desire to be in science, not based on their financial background or socioeconomic background, but to make sure that science is built from a pool of people who are truly the best scientists, or not just the wealthiest people who could afford to come into the programs. And this is actually the hardest thing to do. The other 2 things we figured out pretty well, but it is quite difficult to reach students to have funding for everybody. So that's, I would say, our challenge right now is delivering on our 3rd goal. And as I mentioned, our solution for addressing this problem is to provide hands-on training, relevant real-world training with 21st century research models that can also teach broadly applicable knowledge and skills to give students access to the lab and real equipment, to have them seeing real scientists, have mentorship, expose them to the different career paths available to them, and to do this at every stage. So that's one of the things that's made us unique. Even our kindergarteners do classes with stem cells or cells. So at every stage, from kindergarten to working professionals, we have figured out a way to teach bioscience from basic concept to specialist skills using these real life models and in a real life setting. And this just describes what I mentioned previously, that we take all of the knowledge that we generate in our research and we translate it into these different education programs at different ages. And the programs have different goals at different ages. So in the young students, our goal is to inspire, to build basic skills, help students pick education and pathways based on their abilities, their interest, an understanding of how to forge a career, to provide them with support and exposure and role models. When we get to the professional courses, we are teaching very specific skills that professionals need to integrate different research models into their research. And we also try and engage in public outreach and education, like seminars like this, to speak about stem cell science and some of the myths and facts about stem cell science, but just generally about science, to engage the public in science and education outreach. This is a list of the courses that we have developed over the years. So you can see this became, we're not even close to being done. This became an organization of its own, really. It outgrew USC, and that was why one of the main reasons that we left USC, and we set up our own facility. So at every age, we have programs from kindergarten to professionals that are teaching core concepts in biology, using stem cells and cells as a model. And our students are learning a lot of relevant techniques from cell biology, cell culture, molecular biology, genetic engineering. We've actually just moved into tissue engineering, cell derivation, so modern techniques that we think that students need to be able to learn to move into professional science. And here are some of our students at work, busy at work, just to show you that we have from the littlest guys in elementary all the way up to professionals who fly in from around the world to come and take our courses. And the key thing about all of our courses, they're hands-on, they're held in the lab no matter the age, they're taught by scientists in the real world. Stem cells are our main teaching tool. And our goal is to help people develop the skills they need to be in a professional science field. And here are some more pictures of our kids at work, just to show that they really do delve into real life science. Even our middle school kids. So this was, this bottom picture here was a middle school group who did a research project with us, where they started developing some of the methods that we would need to have mobile labs that could take stem cells to the classroom and actually begin to teach students in the classroom, so bring more relevant skills to the classroom so that the students don't always have to come to us. So it was really nice that the students got to work on developing this technology that might one day help other students to learn in a classroom setting.
Victoria, I have a question.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So during this time of pandemic, when you haven't been able to have the students in the labs, have you done any other work? Is there any virtual work that's been done, or could you just speak a little to that?
We ran in person throughout the whole pandemic.
You did? Okay.
Yes. So we did not close down. We have recently been contracted to develop a virtual program for a large youth group organization. We will probably take the foundation of that and launch our own virtual program next year. But we ran in person throughout the pandemic.
Great, thanks.
So you can see PPE is part of our life, whether there's a pandemic or not. Infection control. And we teach in very small classes. So our classes don't have more than 6 to 8 students. And as a biotech organization, we were not required to close down. So we were able to run in person throughout the pandemic with sensible precautions. So this highlights a little bit of our educational impact. Actually, we have, these numbers need to be updated. We have a couple of more years to add to this, but we have trained now going on thousands of students from all over the world, not just from the US. Our courses evaluate really well. So the students, if they can, come back and take more courses with us and state in their future that what we taught them was really helpful to their future, their career, their decisions, to them getting into a lab in college. So I think that's really critical. When students go to college, it can be quite difficult for them to get into a research lab, particularly if they don't have any prior experience. But being able to present that they've learned these basic skills and that the mentor can then build upon is helpful to securing future lab positions. So it puts the student on a path that they can stay on. It inspires them to continue in real world science of all kinds, not just in the lab, but bioinformatics. So we're trying to delve into some bioinformatics. We're trying to really show the broad array of opportunities in science, not just the lab science. The lab science is a big part of it because it's very difficult to teach if you outside of a professional lab. We have done fairly well at providing courses equitably, but we still have a lot of work to do for fundraising to make them truly equitable. One thing that we've done really well is attracting a lot of female students. So our students are overwhelmingly female, actually, which is really interesting. And they all go on to college. They all go on to do very well. We have helped a lot of low-income students from very impoverished neighborhoods. So we have had grant-funded programs in the past, and just through fundraising have been able to help students who might not otherwise go to college or go into science start to think about science as a career. So to build skills, build ideas, knowledge, and think about science as a career. And as I mentioned, I think this is our final hurdle to success, is when we can train everybody who is science-minded, and regardless of their background, and that is a part of the goal of some of the mobile programs and virtual programs as well. So I might have ended a little soon.
That's okay. That's okay, Victoria, because we have a couple of really good questions.
Okay. I prefer questions to speaking, actually.
Awesome. So if anyone else, we have about 4 minutes left. So we'll get through these questions. And if anybody else has any, please be sure and throw them into the chat. The first question we have is, has Prop 14, the California Stem Cell Research Prop, created more opportunities for high school and community colleges that we might not know about as teachers? Funding for simple hands-on cell culture lab experiences would make our courses more exciting. Do you have any comments on that?
They have not, to my knowledge. They are currently debating the educational programs that they're going to fund right now. So they have announced that they're going to continue funding their community college bridges program, which is awesome because it's a really great program. They are now writing the RFA for the high school program, but that would be a university-funded research program for high school. And we are hoping that we'll be eligible to apply for that. We actually have a grant that we run collaboratively with Caltech, but it ends this year. So we're hoping that we can apply for that. In terms of other programs, I don't know. But what I would say is that the bridges are required to have an outreach component. And so if you work with a local bridges college, it might be possible that through them you could work to have someone come into the classroom, because I know the PCC bridges program, they do that. They go mobile to classrooms with cells.
And another question we have is, combating the stem cell myth is a challenge. The perceived connection between abortions and stem cells is hard to unravel. Moreover, products created using stem cells from aborted fetuses are often rejected by religious groups. J&J vaccine, for instance. How do you address these misconceptions and challenges in your training program?
Interestingly, we have a lot of Catholics come into the programs. And I think maybe understanding the space, I don't find it so challenging, because each of these stem cell types that I showed you are very distinct. So if we go back to this slide of the human life cycle, these are all very distinct stem cell types. And actually very few people, so fetal stem cells are really the only, fetal and embryonic germ stem cells, embryonic germ cells are really the only stem cells that you would have any ethical issues with, because all of these other types of stem cells, you can actually make them from iPSCs now. So, or if you were doing work with embryos. And this is the minority of stem cell research. I mean, very, very few people are doing this. And they are only doing it mostly at the translational stage that I know of. Most people work with these other stem cell types that are not ethically contentious, or they turn iPS cells into an earlier stem cell type. So I can explain that to people, but there are some people who do work with fetal stem cells, and of course they are used in the production of therapeutics and medicines. Mm-hmm. And that's an ethical debate that we have to have with the students, because there's not a great way around that for certain things. And so I think it's up to each person to really, they have to make their own decisions about whether they're okay for that. But 99% of what you do in the stem cell field now is not, with modern technologies, is not going to ethically upset somebody.
And I think we have time for one more question here is, what are your experiences working with umbilical cord stem cells?
I haven't really worked with umbilical cord stem cells.
Okay. And we have one comment here is, mm-hmm. The biology majors at my community college are mostly female too. I wonder if mm-hmm. all of our female students make it to a career in science though.
I think they make it. My personal feeling, this is not data driven. My personal feeling is retaining a science career as a woman, I think, is challenging, particularly if you have a family. And actually that is one of the many reasons I set up my own organization, because it was I am the main caregiver for my son. My husband travels through the week, he's not home. And it was really, I needed flexibility. And it was not possible for me to continue in an academic career as the main caregiver for my son. So that was why I became my own boss as well. That was another big driver in the decision.
Thank you so much, Victoria, for an incredible presentation. This is available, I believe, for people mm-hmm. to download through the Huba app. And then also this concludes our sessions for today. We'll be back tomorrow at 3 o'clock, and we invite everybody to join us then. We've got some terrific presenters Genentech's going to be with us, as well as we'll have a fireside chat with some CEOs and others in the life science space. So thank you all for attending today, and we'll see you tomorrow. Have a great evening.